Well, Katie Britt was on Fox News Sunday. She had an interview with Shannon Bream, and to my surprise, Shannon held her feet to the fire. So I'll play it and I'll get my commentary.
Joining us now, Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I appreciate you having me.
All right, quite a game last night. And I do have a niece at Alabama, so at the risk of alienating a lot of people, roll tide. But wow, that was quite a game.
Hey, roll tide.
I mean, President Trump was
Between
there.
President Trump's visit, yes, he was there. It was just incredible. And then obviously, I think this game will go down as one of the best college football games ever played. And I think Tuscaloosa is still reverberating this morning. And you should have heard it when they announced President Trump. I think the cheers are something that likely registered on the Richter scale. So it was just an exciting night all the way around, and roll tide.
Well, listen, I did see the game last night, obviously, and the reception that he got. He's polling well in Alabama, but our polling shows that in Georgia, he's got a little bit of a problem. There he is down by 3 points to the vice president. And part of that is a gender gap with women who say they do not trust you or him, the GOP, on issues of abortion or IVF. This week, Ohio Senate candidate Bernie Moreno adding fuel to that fire with some comments he made there. Why is this messaging on that issue in particular not working? How can the GOP, is it possible to fix it? Because women just don't trust you guys on that one.
Look, we are going to continue, I think, to be able to grow in the polls here. And as we're able to talk about these issues and get our message out to voters, they'll see where President Trump stands on this. Look, there's been no stronger supporter of IVF than President Trump. If you think about the situation that occurred in Alabama, President Trump came out immediately and said that he strongly supported IVF and he encouraged the Alabama legislature to act. They acted within 6 days of that, Shannon, and our Republican legislature and our Republican governor signed IVF protection into law. We've continued to talk about this. Senator Ted Cruz and I led a letter with all 49 Republican senators signing on, saying they strongly support nationwide access to IVF. And the truth is, Democrats continue to use this issue as a scare tactic because IVF is legal and accessible in all 50 states. And President Trump has made it perfectly clear that he'll continue to make sure that that's the case.
So you voted against a measure, though, that was offered up by Democrats on IVF in the Senate there, and they continue to point to that to say Republicans aren't supportive of protecting IVF. Why did you vote no?
So, Shannon, I'm so glad you brought this up. This is politics at its worst. If you think about what Chuck Schumer is doing, instead of putting funding bills on the floor that are so critically important to actually doing our job for the American people, of which he put none on the floor, instead of putting the National Defense Authorization Act on the floor so that our servicemen and women can be the best trained, equipped, and ready across the planet, instead of putting the Farm Bill on the floor, which we do every 5 years, and our farmers are hurting. You can talk to any farmer in any corner of this country and they say it is challenging to make ends meet, and we know food security is national security. Instead of putting any of those bills on the floor, Shannon, he chose to put an IVF bill on the floor for a show vote. That bill extended into human cloning. That bill did not protect religious freedom, something that we have agreed is a bipartisan issue, something we do consistently. This time they chose to rip that out. I have been there has been probably no more vocal supporter outside of President Trump than myself when it comes to making sure we have nationwide access to IVF. You have to get to 60 votes in the United States Senate. Not one member of the Democratic Party came over to try to garner enough votes for 60. It was simply a show vote. It was never intended to pass. He would not allow us to have time for amendments or anything else. So it's just it's Schumer's summer of scare tactics that he has moved into the fall of fear mongering. I think it's despicable because he is stoking fear that should not exist and unfortunately playing politics, and the American people lose when Chuck Schumer's in charge.
Well, DNC Chair Jamie Harrison feels good about where they are. Obviously, the Senate is in play as well. Republicans are hoping to flip it. But he says he's feeling bullish on places like Montana, Ohio. He says even Florida and Texas and Missouri. Is it possible that Republicans are overconfident? Is this possibly another midterm 2022 when that red wave did not materialize the way that you all had hoped? Because Democrats say when it comes to this issue of abortion, which is on a lot of state ballots as well, they feel like it's going to put them over the top, and they're going to maintain control of the Senate.
Look, I was actually with Steve Daines last night, who is the chair of the NRSC, senator there from Montana. He is working diligently to ensure that we make sure that we take back the Senate. And of course, we hope to do that in a big fashion. But he is being diligent in every single sector. We're taking nothing for granted. Even in places where we're ahead, we are working like we are 5 points behind. Because, Shannon, we believe that the future of our country depends on it. When you see Chuck Schumer saying and Kamala Harris saying they will break the filibuster to do radical things, and you know, whether it's take gas powered cars off of the road, whether it is banning fracking, when we know that we not only need to be energy independent, we need to return to the energy dominance of President Trump. Where we look at our border, we know what's at stake. Look, President Trump had the most secure border of all time, and now we look at what we have under Vice President Kamala Harris's borders are. We have over 425,000 convicted criminals on the non-detained docket for ICE. Look, I ran these numbers last year. They're up over 1.5 million from the numbers we had last year on the non-detained docket. Of that, we know, to your earlier point when you opened this show, 13,000 convicted murderers. Do you understand that? Convicted murderers roaming our streets. We have 16,000 convicted, people that are convicted of sexual assault. Our country is not stronger. It is not safer. We've heard already on the show, literally the world is on fire. Under President Trump, we actually got to see what peace through strength meant. Putin never invaded Ukraine under President Trump. We see the Middle East. President Trump was able to institute the Abraham Accords, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. There has been no more pro-Israel president than President Trump. The world was a more stable place. Our border was more secure. Our dollar went further. And ultimately, as women look at the next generation, and they want to leave this country better for their children. And when you watch this debate on Tuesday night and you see Tim Walz be asked the question, are we better off than we are 4 years ago? He, just like Kamala Harris, will not be able to answer that question because the answer to that is no.
Okay, let me just say a couple things. You heard your colleague, Senator Coons. He said of those numbers of the people who are free here in the country, he says many of them are incarcerated. We've asked DHS for clarification on those numbers as well. But I very quickly want to give you a chance to respond to what he said about Ukraine, that President Trump doesn't have the best interests of those folks at heart. I know there was a meeting this week with President Zelensky, but there are many who worry about the Trump position, the Vance position, that it will include ceding some territory to Putin as a way to end this, and that being something that the Ukrainian people do not want to accept. Quick comment from you on Ukraine.
Look, there is a reason that President Putin only invaded Ukraine under Obama, Biden, and then again under Biden-Harris. The world respects President Trump, and I believe that Vladimir Putin does as well. And so I know that President Trump met with Zelensky. He understands the importance of standing firmly with our allies. And you look at what Joe Biden has done and Kamala Harris, slow walking resources to Ukraine, and their disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, disastrous withdrawal, has created a ripple effect across this globe where people do not respect us. The moment that President Trump gets back in office, people will respect the United States and know we mean what we say and we say what we mean. He will protect and stand firmly with our servicemen and women, and he will back the blue. We will have law and order once again, safer streets, and we will have a more peaceful globe, guaranteed.
Right. Well, about 5 weeks to go. We'll see what the American people decide. Senator, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shannon.
So the first thing they start off with is some sports stuff, which, with a little friendly banter. But then we get to discussing IVF. Now, Britt tries to portray herself and Trump as being these big champions of, this procedure that lets women have pregnancies in ways that are not considered natural by a lot of these religious people. And Shannon says to her, well, okay, if you're someone who supports IVF, if you're this big advocate of it being a thing that's accessible in all states, even though ironically enough, your state Supreme Court is the one that heard it the most of any of them. Why did you vote against the Senate bill having to do with IVF? And then there she goes with her spin. Now, the actual reason she voted against it is that Britt is a liar, and she's trying. She is aware to some degree that if you're a woman and your main issue is reproductive rights, you are more inclined to vote for really any Democrat over the former president who appointed three Supreme Court justices that helped to overturn Roe v. Wade. And in knowing this, she has to spin it. Oh well, that bill was never meant to pass. They didn't have one Democrat come over to try and get a Republican to help it pass. And it's like, well, lady, you know that. Well, maybe she doesn't know, but basically, ever since McConnell became Senate leader for the Republicans back in, I think it was 2007, it's been a hyper partisan chamber where any bill that passes tends to pass with little to no support from the opposition party. So, what Democrat in their right mind would think after seeing Republicans spend 8 years being against everything Obama wanted to do? Oh, yeah, we can get some Republicans to back us on this bill. Like, why? Who would think that? You get, 8 years of complete opposition to Obama, 4 years of complete opposition to Biden, and you're surprised no Democrat reached across the aisle to try and get Republicans to vote for this bill. Really? And then she talks about the bill had no protections for religious freedom and had some stipulations about cloning. And this is where it starts getting like nuts. Like, what does religious freedom have to do with someone wanting IVF? Again, the only correlation is that there are people who are religious, who are in the Republican Party, that see IVF as an unnatural way of having children and thus are against it for that basis. But if you're someone that supports it and you're religious, can't really see what religious freedom would have to do with it. And when she said cloning, I just thought about the Trump, the comment about eating the dogs in Ohio. It's like you're being asked about a bill that is meant to protect access to a procedure having to do with reproduction, and you bring up cloning? Like, what? Let me I just want to segue over to this. It must have been about a few weeks ago. Harris had released a statement on the Senate Republicans voting to block national protections for IVF. And in this statement, she actually mentions the proposed attempts to have a national abortion ban. There have been 4 attempts in the last 2 years. Legislation that blocks contraception. And she says, in reference to Republicans, their opposition to a woman's freedom to make decisions about her own body is extreme, dangerous, and wrong, which I agree with. Now, going over to the second part of this, where they start talking about the election, which is only a little bit over a month away, and I still can't believe we have such little time to go before this is all over. She mentions, and this is what all of Trump's surrogates tend to have, this rapid fire blast of either things that are not true or stuff that's kind of spun in a certain way. She mentions Harris is the border czar, and people, and when Vance is debating Walz, the latter is gonna be asked, are Americans better off than they were 4 years ago? Referencing the Reagan line. And it hits me. I said, these people, again, 1 month to go until this election is over, and they still have not figured out that they're not running against Biden anymore. When they bring up, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? That's something you say to a one-term president trying to get reelected, not to a one-term vice president trying to take the reins. She was the border czar. It's like, okay, but she still could not actually do anything about immigration. The office of the vice presidency has no executive powers. Like, and man, the other part, something I've also noticed in watching these interviews, and I love these interviews because we really, we get to see what these people think. During her rapid fire of just different positions. She mentions that Putin invaded Ukraine under Obama and Biden, and how this wouldn't happen if Trump was in office. Peace through strength, blah, 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 blah. Now, Trump has been able to largely not talk about international issues, at least in a way that is specific. Like, he'll say things such as, oh, yeah, Israel has a right to defend itself, the same old generic thing of that. But when it comes to what specific things am I going to do different from the current administration, not really much. And of course, my favorite part is when she says the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. And it's like, imagine, like, because she wasn't a senator when that happened. She only came into office last year. But imagine looking at a war that went for 20 years under 4 presidents and saying, oh yeah, that the one who got us out of there, oh, that was disastrous. I wish Bream had asked her, okay, if that was bad, what would be your proposal for it to have been good? Should we have stayed in there longer? Should we have delayed it by a few months to make sure the exit? What I mean, it's sad that we've been seeing presidents and their administrations. I can still pull up the 2014 Biden quote about Afghanistan, talk about getting out of there for years, and only when it finally happens, when a war is truly over, at least with with this particular country, we have all these other conflicts still going, but when a war is finally concluded, the response to that is, well, you didn't do it in a specific type of way in which I would prefer. I mean, it's nuts. But no, this is another example of just the wheels turning for these people. The other final highlight is that she mentions they are not taking anything for granted. I don't think that's true. Like, Trump is holding rallies, yeah, but I don't really see his campaign as like actually being as aggressive as they can be. And look, he has a chance of winning, right? I'm not going to pretend that he doesn't. It's going to come down to those same 6 or 7 states. But the Republicans are really in for a rude awakening when it comes to elections. They have seen horrendous results since Roe v. Wade got overturned. And that's because a lot of people who were not as engaged saw something that affects them be stripped down after it'd been up for almost 50 years. And they are coming for payback. So yeah, she's I guess since she couldn't cut it as Trump's VP pick, she's trying to launch her own White House bid by taking whatever weird position he has and regurgitating it. But it's like, you're in the party that is against reproductive rights, whether it's abortion, whether it's IVF. And American voters, like, most of them are not as engaged with this stuff as a lot of the people who just live and breathe it like I do. But they know Democrats, pro Roe v. Wade, pro IVF, Republicans, anti this, anti that. Like, it's not a hard equation to figure out. And you guys are never going to shake that image because you have so closely aligned yourself with, again, like, all of these themes of religion and moral grandstanding. And I almost forgot to say this. She had the nerve to mention that Trump was going to be better on curbing crime than Biden. How, like, explain this to me. How is the president, the former president, with 91 criminal charges, going to get criminals to stop doing things? That's the person who has the moral high ground to correct the lawlessness of American society. The president, the convicted criminal president, is the one who's going to stop crime in America. Hey, if Britt can't cut it as a 2028 presidential candidate, or she doesn't want to run for another term in the Senate, maybe she can book a comedy tour with a lie like that.